the second part of the question, I'll paraphrase a little bit because there's a little bit about complaining about the complainer. But it was basically
right.
things.
It's easy to do.
This avoidance strategy was because things just feel too toxic, and they were wondering, is there such a thing as like a healthy complaint and an unhealthy complaint?
Yes.
And I would say every complaint has in it a healthy yearning for one of these evolutionary values, one of these virtues, for partnership, for passion, for freedom, for possibility. Every complaint is a
bid for something greater, grander.
Yeah, exactly. And also every complaint has some kind of a distortion, which may or may the degree to which it's distorted may not have anything to do with the person being complained about. It could, like if this lower self-esteem causes people to complain more, people who don't feel safe tend to complain more. So the level of distortion could have nothing to do with you. However, there's always a legitimate bid for that value. And if you get on board with that value and create it more powerfully in partnership with them, then the complaint will
dissolve,
unwind itself.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is different than us saying we're endorsing that people ought to complain more.
Yeah.
And that complaining is a great strategy. Again, we've named it as a toxic cycle, right? When your relationship is full of a lot of complaint and defense, it can become more and more toxic as it goes.
For those of us that tend to be on the defense side, just to position ourselves there, there's a little superiority in it. There's a little like, I'm a better person. I'm not the attacker. I'm the defender, and the other person's the aggressor and I'm not the aggressor. But when all you have to do is listen to your own voice about how you're speaking about the complaint, and it'll be pretty obvious that you're complaining about the complaint. So it's there. You're really not superior. All my complaints about complaints are just complaints. It's just the same old stuff.
Same cycle.
And that's why it's the cycle that just keeps going round and round and round and round. And there's really no sorting it out. You can't ever be right or wrong about a complaint. You can only be on board with the value the complaint was designed to enhance. There was a really great question. So they were listening to us and they said, wait, so it's not the complaint that either has health or lacks health. It's the response to the complaint that either has health and lacks health. And I don't think that's quite it.
It's close, but
yeah.
There's some wisdom in what you're saying, but we have maybe a little bit of a different distinction.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Certainly a response to a complaint can be healthy. And maybe I'm tripping on even the idea that a complaint has health or lacks health. I think of it a little more like is true or is distorted. So if there's a complaint, there's a thread of truth in it, and there's also a distortion. And if you can find the thread of truth and then just double down on it, and just say, yes, I am on board with that truth. Then instead of defense, which also defense has a thread of truth and a distortion in it. And it's the distortions that amplify each other in the toxicity. So if you want to say health or not health, to me, it's the distortions that are not healthy. And there's in order for there to be a complaint, there has to be a distortion. In order for there to be a defense, there has to be a distortion. Because the actual truth is, I did that thing and that's what happened.
Yeah, I just want to add to this because I love this discussion. I love where you're going. I'm really fond of Richard Rudd, and he wrote a book called Gene Keys. And if any of you are looking for like a deep dive into sort of the whole structure of all of our shadows and our gifts and even acidic states when we evolve even beyond where we are today, he's got a whole manual of our evolution. But in it, he talks about this dynamic of complaint and judgment. And what he says, I think, is relevant. And what he says is that as we judge, the issue is not so much the judgment, but it is the identification as superior or inferior that goes alongside the judgment. The judgment itself is just like a noticing of reality and a noticing of what could be, right? A noticing of how it is and a noticing of what could be. What happens that when we, as the carrier wave of that judgment, is we either make ourselves superior and our partners inferior, or we make ourselves inferior and our partners superior. And that identification is where if there's any unhealthy aspect of complaint, it's when we fall into that dynamic, which is that unequal, unpartnered dynamic of I'm right, you're wrong, or I'm wrong and or I'm bad and you're better, right? Any of those that create that inequity, that create kind of a false sense of limitation for either yourself or your partner, or a false aggrandizing of your ego that isn't actually foundationally true and sitting on the ground of like your healthy, hold and heal parts of you. That is the problem. That is where there's unhealthiness in it.